Now, I'll bet many of you are as concerned about climate change as I am. It's affecting absolutely everything in our society, our economy, our environment, and more world peace when it comes right down to it. I'd also guess that pretty much all of you live in a house, work in a building, attend events in an auditorium from time to time, might even go out to a restaurant to eat. And what we don't think about is 40% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from those buildings. This is an enormous problem. The good news is that over 70% of all US citizens buy power from a utility that now has a greenhouse gas reduction goal. And many of them are quite aggressive. Here in California, our goal is a zero GHG goal by 2040, which is frankly around the corner. And so how do you get to that sort of solution? First and foremost, we have to get off fossil fuels. This means your cars, obviously, but also this is fossil gas, natural gas, same thing. That comes into our homes and also powers most of our grid. So there's an enormous effort underway that we can all participate in, which is electrification of all of our end uses. This means the furnace, the water heater, those things have to go. We're going to replace them with heat pumps that run efficiently off electricity. Your gas range, that's now going to be an induction range. It's better, but it also is electrification, and we can clean up the electric grid. But there are challenges. So we're building all of these new loads on the electric grid, but right now in California, half of all of our electricity is being generated by fossil gas, yet again. So then the big challenge is, how do we deal with decarbonization of our electric system while we're building all these new loads? So obviously we need to generate a lot of clean energy. Wind power, solar. How many of you have solar in your house? I do. Solar's great. It's clean, it's local, it's reliable, it can be resilient. But solar has a problem. Well, actually, it's not solar's problem, it's the sun. And the problem is that it sets every day, which is very inconvenient because it sets at the wrong time, because in California, our peak when we need the most energy is summer times right now around 4 to 9 p.m. and actually 8 and 9. Those are the bad hours. That's when it's dirty and it's expensive and we're running off that fossil fuel. So in order to decarbonize our grid and get where we need to go, we need to electrify, but we also need to balance supply and demand. We need to use all of this clean energy we're generating. And that solar problem is a big problem. It manifests as something called the duck curve in California, which is referencing the shape of our demand. It's kind of hard to see without a slide. But the problem being is in the middle of the day, we are generating so much solar right now in California that the price of energy goes below zero many days of the year. We are literally paying states like Oregon and Arizona to take solar from us. We have to pay them. And we're turning off as much as 20% of our large-scale renewables on the grid. And so this is terribly inefficient. We need all that solar. We need more solar, but we got to be able to put it to work, or it's not going to get us there. So one kind of obvious solution that we talk a lot about is storage, right? Like we can put that in a battery. We can pump hydro behind a dam and use it later. We can charge our cars. And we should do all of that because this problem is so enormous. This is not a silver bullet. This is a solid bit of buckshot that we need. We need lots of solutions. The other side of that same equation, which represents a massive, relatively untapped resource, is something my company and we call demand flexibility, which is aligning how you use energy and when you use energy with when it's in good supply and when it's low cost and it's clean. And it comes in lots of forms. It could be insulating attics with air conditioners. It's the heat pump that you put in the new house. It's your smart thermostat. It's industrial processes happening at the right times of the day. It's refrigeration systems, pre-cooling so they can float during these peak periods. There's a tremendous amount of potential everywhere we look, huge opportunities. But it's kind of bespoke. It's like everywhere. It's a lot of it. It's not this nice, simple grid that we're used to. No, it's never really simple, but the California Independent System Operator used to be able to put these, see our big screens on the wall and have pictures of power plants and wires between them, and it sort of made sense. And they keep it all stable. But that's a lot harder when you're talking about 12.4 million residential meter endpoints in the state doing stuff. And that's really the problem that I've been trying to solve with my company, Recurve, is how we take that complexity and we utilize all of the smart meters that we've invested billions in that give us telemetry to understand what are these buildings doing? Who has an air conditioner that's running way too much during peak, and what can we do about it? And also, how do we look at all of these meters and say, if we put smart thermostats on these meters and insulate the attic and put in a heat pump, and we do all of these things, how do we measure the impact they're having, and how do we make that into what we call a virtual power plant? which is how do we orchestrate all of these buildings to be grid participants? And the good news is you guys have something to say about this. This is not some power plant in the distance. This is the house you live in and the building you work in and this auditorium being a participant in decarbonization. So with this telemetry, with these smart meters, we're able to measure and quantify how these buildings are changing their usage patterns. And we can aggregate them together. We're not looking at, well, we are looking at the individuals, but it's that aggregate that represents the virtual power plant where we can reliably forecast and measure them and allow utilities and CCAs in California, community choice aggregators, to integrate this distributed flexibility resource coming from all of you into the grid as a power plant. So these are virtual power plants, but this is not the metaverse. These are having a real effect. They're every bit as valuable as a traditional supply-side centralized power plant. In fact, they're more valuable because unlike that large-scale power plant, they're creating local jobs and encouraging innovation in our communities. And they're also helping each and every one of you reduce your energy costs. This transition is not free. Make your houses more comfortable, healthier, resilient, all at the same time. These are added benefits. So we should always be tapping flexibility in virtual power plants where they exist and where they are cost competitive with supply side resources. That should be the first line in everything that we do. So once one is able to measure, and we are, and quantify what's going on and make that reliable and forecastable and folks can actually believe in it and finance it, then it's a how do you deploy it. So Recurve works with utilities and CCAs across the whole country and actually different parts of the whole world actually at this point to deploy what we call a flex market. And some of the leading relationships that we have are with CCAs. We work very closely, for example, with MCE, just south of us, as well as Sonoma Clean Power and EBCE in the East Bay of California as well, to establish a marketplace where those CCAs and utilities can sign what are called flexibility purchase agreements. This is like a solar PPA, but in reverse, with companies who are out building these solutions that you all need to make your houses grid participants and decarbonize buildings, and pay for those virtual power plants in very much the exact same way as we would pay for new capacity or energy on the grid, and encourage that behind-the-meter innovation in our communities, and make, again, all of our buildings a participant in decarbonization. Now, crisis and opportunity are very similar. So in 2020, we had a crisis. You might remember August. There were about 5 days, it was above 100 degrees in a row. And we had rolling blackouts across California, which is terribly expensive, dangerous. People die when that happens. Kind of a side note really to that, but politically very unfortunate. That's not good for governors and other folks when that happens. So that's everybody on alert. We know our grid is not stable. Now, earlier last year, the California Independent System Operator that operates our grid and the California Energy Commission, as they do every year, released their forecast for the California grid. And they're forecasting for this coming summer and beyond a 3.5 to 4.4 gigawatt shortfall during peak. We don't have enough electrons to keep the lights on in California. 4.4 gigawatts, that's 4,400 megawatts. If you guys are familiar with the Diablo nuclear power plant, it's our last big nuke in California. We're actually decommissioning it, but it's 2.2 gigawatts. So this is a shortfall of 2 nuclear power plants that we have to make up the difference on. So this is a proper emergency, and Governor Newsom responded as such. In July, he issued an emergency summer reliability proclamation across all agencies that said everybody's got to rally and figure out solutions to this problem across every state agency. And a lot of that, frankly, is more fossil gas. We're buying turbines as fast as we can. We're actually paying diesel generators to spin during peaks, which is not only expensive, but like dirty, right? Locally dirty. Nobody wants that. That's the opposite of a decarbonized grid. But when it comes down to it, reliability is king. We got to keep the lights on. And that's true also. So as part of that process, the Public Utilities Commission of California started a proceeding that actually went fast, which I was unaware that was possible. And a bunch of folks, Recurve, but also MCE and East Bay Community and Sonoma Clean Power and others contributed ideas. And one of those ideas was taking this flex market, this open market approach to engaging local reliability through flexibility behind the meter through virtual power plants and expanding it. And we had proposed a big expansion to $40 million statewide, which seemed big. Come December, the PUC voted, and the commissioners unanimously approved their proposal, and it was what they proposed is a $160 million expansion of this flex market statewide. So we're right now, a couple months into ramping up for this summer, a much larger approach that can harness this virtual power plant tech approach, working with companies up and down the states, residential solar and storage and commercial refrigeration and lighting and HVAC. We're agnostic to all of that. And we're saying, look, if you can build business models that customers actually want to invest in, that also bring us grid benefits in the form of decarbonization and reliability, we'll pay you for that value because it's cheaper than the alternative and it helps customers. And so that's scaling up now and that's scaling up here. We'll be deploying this summer primarily in Northern California, and all of you in your buildings, in your places of work, in your homes, will be seeing new opportunities to make investments that benefit you in the form of comfort and resiliency and lower bills, but also help us decarbonize the grid. And you'll be a part of the virtual power plant and be paid for that, for those benefits that are accruing to all of us mutually as we all strive to decarbonize the power system and do what we can to combat climate change. Thank you.